Today I'm going to take all these little cutouts and we're going to compose a rather demanding composition. The reason it's demanding is it's a small 12 by 16 canvas. But the reason it's demanding is because there's only 4 or 5 elements in it. And having 4 or 5 elements means each element is very important. If I had 17 elements, it'd be 1/3 as important. But so I've made several copies of different sizes here, more than I probably need. But I did all these just to show you the thought process, and I'm going to go step by step through this, and hopefully it'll make precisely a point. I don't do this often, but I think it's a good teaching tool, and I used to do it. In really complicated pieces, I will do it. So I have these different size arches. This is a canal in Venice. And so I have these different arches here that I want to incorporate. And so I'm going to start moving these around and show you what it is I think as I go through these. I want to start with the arches. I have 4 choices. I'll start with the arches because they're the most important part of the painting. And I want the gondola to relate to the arches. This one I feel is simply too small. You see how it floats? There's no way I could bring in windows and other things, but the arch would still be too small. So I'm going to eliminate that one. Then I'm going to consider the second one. Consider this with, I've got a gondola here too that I'm going to employ. And the gondola is important that it uses a stopper. There's going to be a left to right motion here. And the gondola, the sweep of this gondola is going to arrest the locomotion. So I'm going to start moving things around. I'm already feeling that this one is still too small. So I had a smaller one. That's certainly not going to work. I still have a larger one yet. I think this largest one is probably the one I'm going to start with. We can always reconsider and change our mind later. But I'm going to start with the one that I think would be the optimal one. So part of the criteria or part of consideration right now is that the gondola has to work within the composition. And so I'm going to get the biggest one I have. I think that's the biggest one there. Try the biggest gondola of all. This one's still smaller. Okay, so this is the biggest one of all. So I can extend this on this end a little bit, but I want to consider the relationship between these two. Now, if you see my other videos and things, you know that in my painting, I'm really interested in. If you'll take this the length here and swing it down here, that's going to be right about here. That'll be a good place for a golden mean. So you get a lot of latitude on that, but nevertheless, I want the interest to be here. And I don't want to push the main element over here because that starts to crowd this edge. This edge in a painting, if you look at hundreds and thousands of paintings, this edge in a painting over here is the boring edge. You want nothing to happen there. This corner here especially is the boring corner. If you look through all these thousands and thousands of videos for 500 years, the corners in this place are boring from Da Vinci forward. They're all, you can just see it. The other thing I want to talk about is left-right movement. There is left-right movement. You'll see it time and time again. When you think about chiaroscuro, it's also almost always left-to-right movement. It's not part of the definition, it's just a flow of light to dark. But the chiaroscuro device that's used by Caravaggio and all the others through the years is almost always left to right. The reason they do that is because the left to right is the natural flow as you read across a piece of text in the Western Hemisphere. If you read across a piece of text from left to right, that's just how you read it. The question is always asked, do people that read, people from Asia, do they read the same way as we do? And I assume that they don't. I assume this is a social learned thing, but for us in Europe and Americas, this is how we read, and it has composition through the centuries. You'll see. You start looking at paintings, you'll see chiaroscuro from left to right, and you're going to see there's a flow. Not all paintings have a locomotion. This one is going to have a little bit, principally because of the gondola. I'm anticipating the gondola to create a left to right movement. But we're gonna start moving this around now and see if I can affect a good design. And one reason I don't get too close to the edge here is there's going to be a movement across the page left to right. And you don't want to see that get too crowded to the edge because there's a tendency to jump off the canvas, off the design. That's, the Creation of Man by Michelangelo. The fingers are not quite touching, but they're almost touching, and there's an energy between those where they want to join. And if you get your elements too close to the end, they're going to want to join the frame and jump off the canvas. So leave yourself ample room here. I'm extremely picky about my negative spaces and relationships. We'll speak to that a little bit, but more on that later as we get deeper into these. Okay, so my first thought is I want to position this just so, and I've got these little elements. I'm going to stick these on here for now, just to help balance the thing. I want one of these to go off the edge, and I've got a bunch of these striped Venice post. There's a name for those. I forgot what it is. But so let's just start shifting around, and I'm going to tell you one of the things that I'm concerned about in painting that a lot of people don't care about. But I deal with my portraits, I deal with my landscapes, still lifes, whatever. But it matters to me that this shape here is a different size than this shape. This is about negative shapes. But if I put this, for example, here, then this distance here is the same as this distance here, which really bugs me. Famously don't want to put it in the middle. If you put something in the middle like this, let's stack it. Say we got a window here like this. This is what I call a tennis match composition because this forms a net. And your eye goes from left to right, left to right. It's like a corner in a building. You almost never see this done successfully because it just doesn't work. And so if you sometimes people take that further and there'll be a element that we have to net on the tennis match here, and then you have two elements here, so you go bing, 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 bing. So I'm big into asymmetry, and I do not want that in the middle. Sometimes I put things in the middle just to break the rules, just to be ornery, but that's a different conversation. So I think if we put this right about there, we're not so close to the edge here that it's going to be a problem. And it's getting close to this golden mean area, which I like. So I'm going to stabilize this and kind of scooch around, make it vertical. Now, I want this into this gondola to come in not even in the middle of this. That's how detailed I am about this stuff. I don't even want this to pierce this in the middle. So I'm going to move this over. It's asymmetry on top of asymmetry. So if I can pick up this piece of paper, because we're going to terminate that right about there. So now I'm pretty happy with those two elements. We have prioritized the most important two elements in the painting, and then we're going to go to the secondary batch of elements. This, I think, needs to be a little higher because the bottom of the gondola is being it's too close to the bottom in the same way that this is too close to the edge. If you put something too close to the bottom, what happens is the composition falls out the bottom like a waterfall. So that's another no-no. But let's shift this up here, and I'll show you how this works better. Shift that up there. And we're bring the gondola up here. This is a really small canal, so all the elements are going to be fairly precise. The water edge is right here, so the gondola is going to be sitting right on the edge of the water, right in the middle. It's actually on the building side of the canal. So I'm going to move that up just a little more because I still feel like the gondola is being still too close there. So now if this is the horizon, or not the horizon, but this is the this horizontal where the water hits the gondola. So you can see something on edge. We can shift this around later, but for now I'm put it right there. I'm going to put that right there. So we have our two principal deals. I'm going to tape those down, and then we will not have to fuss with those anymore. All of this is subject to being moved again later, but for now, that's where we're going to put them. One there, and maybe one here on the overlap. So there's our principal two. Now we spend the rest of these elements trying to improve this composition. But you see, we started with the first most important piece, secondary piece, complementary piece. I'm pretty happy with this. I like the negative shape. Clearly it's imbalanced, but we're going to start fixing that now. So let me just temporarily drop in a couple of windows. I have several different size windows here. This one's particularly nice because it's got some old wood in it I like. But see, even with this window, if we put this window up here, it's going to give the composition an ability to exit. I'm really careful about not allowing anybody to exit over here. Just super important. So I think what we'll do is put a window here. This one has a nice little detail on it. I'm going to put a window here, right about there for now. I think that's about the right size. We're going to start getting really loaded up on this side, but we're going to have to do some things over here to balance what's becoming heavily weighted on this side. But this is where we want the most interesting parts. So there's that. Let me just stick this neat window over here somewhere about, maybe about there. Now, I'm altogether fine with this gondola coming in from the left to the right. It's totally fine, and I induce people to come in from the left to the right because I guarantee you, you read from left to right. You read paintings from left to right, you'll see it all the time. If you look at 90% of the portraits in the world, those are done left to right. You'll start seeing it when you just consider it. It's sunk in your head and you can't forget it. So, okay, I'm going to my point, and I do have one. I'm going to take just another little window here, and I'm going to pierce this edge on this side just to further make an interesting negative shapes. I'm starting to worry about my negative shapes here. One of the things that bothers me right now as I look at this is, we could alleviate this a little bit later, but we have something of a bing, 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 and that's creating locomotion, which I'm okay with, except the locomotion is pushing you towards this corner where we do not want you looking at this corner. This is the boring corner. So let's take that out for now. And we've eliminated that locomotion. You see how that's, I can make it even worse. I'm gonna try to show you some things that make composition bad, as well as the things to do to make it right. I'm going to show you what not to do because it's going to make it bad. So you see now we have this really strong locomotion. And I'll show you something else I dislike. Now the windows are all evenly spaced. The negative spaces between the windows are all uniform, which is really irksome to me. I hate that. So all of these things are things I consider when I design. I really do. So let's eliminate that one. This is really annoying. But let's leave this for now. And I have some exciting things that I'm going to add here. These, whatever the name of these posts are, I'll look it up and put it in the description. But there's a name for these things. And they sit on either side of the canal. They usually, like here, there'll be some of these posts to tie up where there's a egress, ingress into a bridge or a little flat place. I don't know what they call those either. But a little place where you can pull the gondolas over, exit, and get onto the gondolas. Wherever there's a place for a tie up, it's sort of like a hitching rail for horses. So these are the things that I was kind of excited about. I have several different sizes and types here. That one's upside down. I have some that are striped, and I have some that are singular old rustic posts like this. And I have a whole myriad of sizes to choose from. Now, when we consider these, Because they're striped, they have a lot of power. They're sort of like a spoke on a wheel. If you've ever tried to paint a wagon wheel, an old-fashioned wagon wheel, they're captivating. They draw you in, and almost every time you see one painted, the artist will interrupt that circle, because that circle, it's not the circle so much, but it's all those intersecting diagonals. They just captivate you. It's sort of like when you put text on a painting. I've done a few still lifes where you have text, like on the happy homemaker around the box, the cardboard box. There's text in there, and I really did work hard to make what text you see almost unreadable. Some of it's upside down, some of it is obscured with an overlap. Just consider that, and you'll see in my other paintings where I've purposely tried not to print legible words, because it captivates you the same way the wagon wheel does. All right, so we have our windows sort of thrown up there. Now let's work with these posts. We have all these many choices, but to the impact of these striped posts, they have an extra amount of power, and they're going to really capture your imagination, capture your attention. So we're going to have to treat these very gingerly with great import. Now, my thought is, as soon as I start considering this, is that I'm going to use these posts for two things. I'm going to use them, one, as a stopper, and I'm going to use them also to accentuate this center of interest here that I've been striving to create. This center of interest right here, this will help emphasize that. We do everything we can, or we should do everything we can to make our composition powerful and effective. Soften things that don't need to be there, make things really crisp that do need to be there. So I'm going to, I kind of like this, I like the size of this one to begin with. Let's see what that one does. And then I'll show you what a smaller one does not do. So eliminate that. And these have to begin right at the water's edge because they're about a foot away from the wall, just logically speaking. And some of the uglier ones, little plain ones like this, I'm sure they're used just for tying things up. And I think the other ones are also used as a signpost to get your attention, to signify something important as you're cruising along. I'm not correct about that, but that's my assumption. But back to the artistic part. We have our arch here that's preeminent, and we've already interrupted the arch with the gondola, which I think is kind of cool. Even this, if this is excruciating, even this is 1/3. The interruption of this is 1/3 within the arch. That's a sort of slow, careful consideration I go through. Okay, so now I don't want to interrupt that again. This gets a little too cluttered right here. Let's leave the arch alone now, but let's come over here. Let's place this here, and that will really stop all locomotion. We have so much going on right here that this post will arrest the locomotion. It's extremely powerful and very useful. Now, because it's so powerful and useful, I probably want to come in with some of these simpler, plainer wooden posts. These are just kind of a gray green. We can put these in here with them and kind of help arrest the thing without. What I'm trying to do is diminish the import of this, because this can become the star of the show. I'm comfortable with it being interesting because it's right here in our golden mean. But either I have to cruise it right in there, or else I have to put it over here. And if I put it over there, then I have to make it not steal the show. It's a supporting cast. But so I've got these little plain wooden ones here I can stick on there that further, they diminish this because they're similar things. Psychologically, the more of these you stick on there, the less important each of them gets. See, every time I put one of those on the composition, each of them becomes less important. This is a good lesson in itself. I spoke about this earlier. When you have several elements, they're not as important. But when you narrow it down and really get simple with them, each of them becomes much more important. So I just put those on there to make my point. I think perhaps we need a smaller one. I think we need a shorter one. This one thinks maybe works better. So let's put this over here. I like the size of this because the tallest one was starting to compete with the size of the arch. And I thought that's not useful. So I'm thinking right about there in that shape is starting to work. So I'm going to tape that down. And we will have our first three elements positioned in order of importance. You start with your main subject, your focal point. You do what you can to accentuate the focal point. And you come over here, and now we've got our stopper, and we've got our supporting cast. The windows are really just supporting cast, so we're going to use those to solve the problem over here in this void. I have no concern about it. This is going to be so interesting. What goes on over there is not especially important. We just have to balance the composition a little bit. But I'm wanting, in the back of my head, I'm wanting to create locomotion to this door. I want to create that locomotion. The gondola itself is going to have locomotion, but I want to create additional locomotion with the windows. And I'll show you how I can do this. I'm going to do these things kind of overtly at first, and then I want to make it more gentle and correct as I go along. Let's just do this in an obnoxious way. You see how this it sweeps you right on down quite purposely? That's annoying, so I don't want to do that. What's a more interesting thing would be to do this, where maybe I put a big one up there, and down here, perhaps I dissect the beginning of it over there, and then maybe I don't even use this other one. I don't want to get this too close to the top either. Let's see how that doesn't work. But if I bring it down here, that's much nicer. That's the same. I'm less concerned about the proximity to the top edge. Bottom edge I'm concerned about quite a bit. I'm really concerned about this edge. The paintings, in the same way that you read a painting from left to right, you have to consider gravity. There's a visual gravity that takes place. It doesn't make sense, but trust me, it does. You can test all these things on your own. But if you get it too close to the edge, it's going to fall at the bottom of your composition. My goal is to get somebody in my composition and leave them there. I want them to go in. You hear things like you bring them in and you take them on a little journey all around and you give them a little place to exit. There's no reason to give somebody a place to exit your painting. You want them to live there forever. So that's part of what I'm going to do in this video is try to dispel the thousands of incorrect information out there. Thousands. And write in the comments. Feel free to ask me questions and to challenge everything I say, because after 52 years of this, I can defend my choices. And your teachers, by the way, they should be able to defend their choices too. If you have a teacher and he says something out of left field, challenge him on that, because he really should, he or she, should be able to defend that position. And a lot of times they can't. If they say, that's just how it is, that's not a good answer. So, as I say in my physical classes, if you have something to challenge me about, raise your hand. And if you're unclear about something, raise your hand and ask me to be more specific. Because people, if you have a question, like in the audience here on YouTube, but if you have a question in class, we've got 22 people in the class, and one person raises their hand and asks a question, I guarantee you 3 or 4 other people were wondering about the same thing. But it's a blind spot that teachers have, and I certainly am not exempt from that. But we have our blind spots. So raise your hand, ask questions, ask them in the comments. I'll try to answer them, clarify these things. But let's get back to our windows now. So we got our little striped post. We got a gondola coming in. We got our archway, which is not too close here. So now we're going to start to consider the windows. And in consideration of the windows, I'm also going to tinker with some more of these striped poles. I think I want to get a couple of these bigger ones. This is probably the biggest of these plain ones I have. What I want to do before we deal with the windows now, I want to I consider these windows as very serviceable, and they're not real. I'm going to stick them up there just for a kind of remind me to keep the thing balanced. It doesn't remind me, but as a, there's things in a painting when you start doing these things. There's times in a painting, and my students will ask me a question that's an intellectual question, but a lot of the things you have to do here become visual, and you have to get them into the concrete realm where you move this around. You can't ponder this within your head and say, I wonder, I think it would feel good there. Don't do that. Make cutouts, make drawings, and simply move them around until you can confirm with your eye that they're correct. But for now, I just have those up there just to generally balance the thing. Because what I want to consider now are these. This is first important, second important, third important. But these over here, by adding additional poles over here, what I do compositionally is I diminish the importance of this one. So I'm going to throw some other ones around over here where the painting begins, so that when they get over here, they're not going to be wowed by this singular post. It's going to be one of the group of striped posts. But this one, by its position, is going to be the most important. But by introducing them over here, they'll understand, oh, that's just one more of those. It's important when you paint something strange and weird and unique that you explain to your viewer. Explain to them what this weird, unique thing is. If I'm painting a still life or a landscape, I have something really strange, and it's just intrinsically strange. It's just an odd shape or a curiosity. I will really try to show another one like it within the composition, even if it's half of one, to explain what this oddity is. So we all kind of know what this is, but just on a psychological and visual conversation, this one is going to be less important as I bring in these others. One of the things I want to do also is maybe put some of these together. And if I put them with overlapping, that overlap is going to help give us depth. Because we're only looking at like, well, the hallway is really interesting. There's sunlight back in here that's part of the reason I want to do this painting. But from the viewpoint to it's just across the canal, so it's like 18 feet across. So we have to establish as much depth within our limited field that we can. So, as I said before, I like this little rough one here. These are just brown and simple. And these over here are not going to be close to the door, but we can infer or we can imply that there's another doorway here. We might even make part of an arch. That might be a good element. But for now, let's consider without the arch. Okay, so over here on this side over here on the left is the side. If you look at my compositions, my still lifes, I break this edge all the time. I break it with purpose and intention, because this is the point where you come into the painting here. So it's okay to break this edge, and it's not only okay, it's probably desirable. However, I don't want to get even this too close. It becomes weird if this is like parallaxing. That's just extremely annoying. So I'm going to bring it over here a little ways. And I think we'll make it a little shorter, just a little bit shorter than the preeminent one. So it has to be somewhat in scale, because these are all fairly the same size, especially when you see them close together. There's some green ones on the Grand Canal, but a lot of them are red, like barbershops. Makes you wonder what came first, the barbershop or the dentist. Google that. Okay, now we have this one. This one I liked because it has a second one behind it. The second one behind it was also striped, but it was just too much striping. If you put all these stripes together, it gets to be kind of like icing on a cake. It's just kind of visually annoying. So I'm going to start with that one, try to start with that one. And then I'm going to consider where I might put this one to help diminish that. I think I like that. And now I'm just going to do some errant things just to show you what not to do. See if I put it right in the middle. That's another one of those boring negative spaces. I put it over here. That's much more pleasing. And now what we have, I actually go through this sort of consideration. What we have now is we have one shape. We're talking about negative shapes. One negative shape, a different negative shape, a different negative shape. So all three of these negative shapes are purposefully different. And it creates an interesting rhythm. You think like a piece of music. There's a rhythm to it, a cadence to it, and we want to bounce it along in a pleasing way. John Singer Sargent was as good at that, as good at that as anyone. And I'll do a whole video just on Sargent's compositions because they are to kill. People sort of vaguely talk about his compositions being good, but I want to tell you specifically why they're good and why he moved things around. We're going to talk about John Singer Sargent's stoppers. I did a webinar on FASO, and the Sargent, I think I used like 4 stoppers. They come across the deal, and there is a stopper. And this is going to be red and white. This is my stopper here. Sargent, I found 4 examples of Sargent come across, like the bot daughters, come across, and there's a stopper. And it's a red stopper even. So Sargent was really aware of this. If you look at El Jaleo, there's a red stopper in El Jaleo. Okay, so back to this. We start to throw these things around here. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I like this thus far. And I'm going to do one more thing here. I'm going to tape that down because I like my negative shapes behind them at this point. So I'll tuck this underneath the gondola. So there's our post. I'm going to do one more, and I may just create one out of thin air. But I'm going to do one more probably over here. Just something small. And it may be something more like a window. I just need a little something over here. I want to break the, I failed to tape that one down. Let me put that back there. Put a piece of tape on there. I'm not loving the fact that there's no break of this corner. And I can break it up here, and I may indeed break it up there. But the main motion, the main locomotion is coming across here. So I'm going to do something to break this left wall. So there, I'm going to just make a thing. We'll change and clarify what the thing is later. But maybe I'll just use I'm going to use another arch. I'm going to tear this in half. I'm going to use another arch to stick back in there just to sort of interrupt that. And this second arch allows us to explain what those are doing there. I will make a different one. I'm not going to repeat, but I'll make a similar one. But you see, now we've given them just enough of the arch to understand it's an arch, but there's not enough there that becomes particularly interesting. But it has this wonderful bridge into the painting. And now when the arch comes down, it picks up the post, and it flows right into here. See that flow? And the flow comes into here, and then the gondola swings you right back up into here, which is going to be extremely bright impasto. I'm going to paint this with a knife. That's the exciting part for me. The gondola is going to be painted really, really thin. This is going to be painted with glowing impasto. There's all these things, I guess most artists do, but there's all these things in my head that I anticipate when I'm designing in my head. I've just tried to reduce these down to drawings so I can show you this long process that I go through to make all these things pleasant. Okay, so now we have all these. I'm really happy. I forgot to tape down my arch. Okay, I'm tape down my arch. And as I say, I'm going to revise the arch. When I go to the final drawing, what I'll do on the next one is I'll probably take a photograph of this when I get done today. I'll take a photograph of this, or I'll just take it and put it on the copier. I'll take a photograph of this rough drawing, and then I'm going to superimpose the drawing onto the panel. I'm not going to bore you with that part of it. You all know how to do that. But the next lesson will start with the drawing on the canvas, and then I'll start to draw, and I'll show you what steps I take. But that part is no longer so much about composition. Um, there will be a few aspects in it because color is part of this equation. And right now we're just in black and white. But so anyway, I'm happy now. And by the way, all this was off the cuff, except for the fact that I wanted this to be very bright, and I wanted the gondola to interrupt the arch. All the rest of this I have done live and in person right here with you. Okay, so we'll do the same when it gets to the painting. I'm really liking this now. It starts to feel balanced. You got a nice sweep here, and we have this void that we can deal with. And one of the other things I want to do is when I paint the bright, glowy bit of bright sunlight in the there's an intersection back there. So this is getting sunlight from above. The canal itself here is still in the shadow, so these are all muted. But through the hallway, about 40 feet inside, there's a courtyard that's getting sunshine. So now back to the windows. Because we solved this entryway with this arch that I'm going to redefine and make it unique. But nevertheless, it allows us to use the post, which is what I wanted to have a reason to put the post there. So now we're going to just move a window or two up in there. I think that's a little small. I think that's a little big. This is like a Goldilocks thing. So let's put this up here, almost to the top. And one of the things I'm looking at right now, I'm looking at the negative shapes around that window. I'm looking at the fact that this shape is a different shape from here, different widths from there. I really do care about all that. So I think that's a good place for it. What I'm going to do when I start the actual painting is I'm going to use the texture of the wall to make the composition more interesting, because I can achieve visual interest with texture, actual texture with the knife and paint, and some implied texture. But we can use the texture of the wall and the bricks and the plaster. We can use that for effect. So I like what I see here very much. I don't want to do too much else. I think this area here I'm going to fix with some texture, because it's starting to work right now, and it can become too busy if I keep tinkering. I'll show you other things we can do that are not helpful. You see how that makes the boring quarter interesting and gives you an exit. I do not want to give you an exit up there. I think one thing we might do that will make it better is I want to take, there's this one little window that's got an interesting ledge to it. It's got a marble ledge on the bottom. I'm going to use that, and I don't want to stick it up there. The reason I don't is because it echoes this striped hole. It's a little heavy-handed, but what I'm going to consider maybe is putting it up right about there. I like it being there, and that's a nice little counterbalance. And then we're not going to have to cure the want in here for elements. We're not going to have to cure that with just simple texture. That would be a bit of a challenge and maybe too much of a challenge. So I'm going to declare victory on this, and in the next video, we'll start the video out with this on the canvas, and we'll start painting and show you how I go step by step painting my thought process. Anyway, that's for another day. Thank you.